To please stand as we officially begin our program today with the national anthem of Guyana. Thank you. Please be seated. So good morning, everyone. I trust that you all enjoyed your breakfast, especially to our visitors. Hope that you had a delicious Guyanese treat as you get ready for December. Honorable Prime Minister of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Brigadier Retired Mark Phillips, Senior Minister in the Office of the President, Dr. Ashni Singh, members of Cabinet, members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Executive Director of CDM, Elizabeth Riley, Deputy Executive Director, we have Director General of the Civil Defense Commission, Colonel Retired Nazrul Hussain, and other members of the CDC team, heads and CEOs of government agencies, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Alfred King, and of course our other distinguished guests gathered this morning. Can we give ourselves a round of applause? You look wonderful. Welcome to the official launch and partnership breakfast, which you enjoyed earlier, for the 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, CDM 14, hosted by CDM and the government of Guyana. And now, I know you're expecting a normal launch ceremony, but ladies and gentlemen, we have got a treat in store for you, because today is about conversation, it is about collaboration and building the momentum for one of the Caribbean's most important, resilient gatherings. And to help us, guide us through the morning, I'm delighted to be joined by someone who lives and breathes strategic partnerships and resilience planning, Andrea, Planning and Business Development Manager at CDM. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Michelle. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. I can feel the excitement in the room. It's really wonderful to be amongst these wonderful people from the Caribbean. Give yourselves a round of applause. All right, good, great.
And for those who are tuned in across the Caribbean, indeed, we send you blessings from Guyana. We had a bit of rain this morning,
Showers
but
of
you know,
blessings.
yeah, rain, blessings. So we hope that we find you well wherever you are across the Caribbean region as we begin this important launch ceremony today.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in our 14th year. Andrea, why did CDM start having this conference, and where was it held before you came to Georgetown, Guyana?
Oh, thank you so much, Michelle, for that question. Persons often talk about conferences being a talk shop. We recognize that this is what people think, but CDM is more than that, much, much more than that. And many years ago, more than 14 years ago, because we certainly have been having the conference biennially, we started the CDM conference. Why? Because we recognize that we had this strategy, the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy, which, by the way, a fun fact, predated the global strategy. CDM started in 2001, and we did not have a global strategy until 2025. And the Caribbean walked in on the global stage and presented to them a regional strategy that informed the global strategy. I think that's a reason for celebration, don't you think? All right, yes, definitely. And we also felt that it was important that this is not just something that is done by a Caribbean regional entity or even with our partners who are also regional and international partners, but that we should have everybody involved in this process. And so the CDM conference has become like a parliament with representatives of various interests, whether it be from the government or from the private sector or civil society or academia. everybody has a voice so that we can shape the Caribbean resilience.
But why this conference format? Why didn't CDM just make an announcement?
Okay, so first of all, where has it been held before? We've held it in regional hubs. So we've held it in Barbados, in Jamaica, we've held it in Trinidad and Tobago, we've held it in the Commonwealth of Bahamas and St. Kitts Nevis. And we are certainly looking forward to having it in Guyana. And why did we seek to do it like this? Because this is Guyana. This is certain, yes? Guyana not only represents regional growth, but it's really one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's on the global stage. So this is the first time we're having a breakfast launch like this. And it's because we recognize the place that we're going to be holding the CDM. And we wanted to ensure that this was going to be a launch that brought together the diverse persons in Guyana and the areas where they represent. And so we see in the room all of those stakeholders and parliamentarians of the CDM in this room. And so we want to be able to generate that groundswell that not only grows in Guyana, but because of its position on the global stage, that certainly generates that global interest.
And just last month, we marked our 60th independence anniversary. So another proud moment for us. So just before we get into our first speech, or hearing from our first speaker, Andrea, so today the focus is on comprehensive disaster management, the acronym CDM. And so for those in the room, for those tuned in across the region, very briefly, CDM, why should every Caribbean citizen care about CDM?
CDM, comprehensive disaster management. CDM, caring does matter. It matters. And we recognize that we are a region where we have faced tremendous risk and impacts. We don't have to go too far to remember the impacts of Hurricane Melissa or Hurricane Beryl or the volcanic impact in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We don't have to go too far to remember COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on us. We recognize that we are also facing many matters in the world. And what CDM does, it gives us a philosophy, a way of which we're going to interact with the risk that we face. It's an integrated approach to the management of risk. Therefore, it means that we all work on this together. And stay tuned. I'm going to unpack it a little bit more in the presentation later.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and that's why CDM 14 arrives exactly at the right moment. It brings together, as we heard a moment ago, the region's best minds, the strongest partners, and of course, we're moving from conversation to decisive action. And at the helm of that effort is the Executive Director of CDM, the first woman to hold this role, a seasoned leader with over 20 years of experience in disaster risk management and regional resilience building. She's been at the forefront of preparedness, response, recovery, mitigation across the Caribbean, including coordinated and regional action during Hurricanes Irma and Dorian and the eruption of Le Soufrière in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming the Executive Director of CDM, Ms. Elizabeth Riley.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you, Andrea. Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers of the Cabinet, Excellencies, Permanent Secretaries, distinguished partners, members of the media, good morning to everyone. Whoa, good morning. That's more like it. So on behalf of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDM, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the official launch of the 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, also known as CDM 14. Our sincere appreciation goes to the government and people of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana for hosting this launch and also for agreeing to host CDM 14 from the 7th to the 12th of December 2026. Honorable Prime Minister, we value Guyana's leadership and commitment to advancing resilience across our Caribbean community. I wish to thank all of our partners who are making CDM 14 possible, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. So today, as Andrea indicated, we are launching more than a conference. We're launching the next level of the regional resilience conversation, what it means for our development, and ultimately, the future that we seek to build for our people. The Caribbean is confronting a rapidly changing and increasingly complex risk landscape, shaped by diverse hazards, including those of seismic, volcanic, geological, and biological origin. Climate-related hazards are becoming more frequent and more intense. And as climate impacts increase, so too do the costs. Hurricane Melissa's $12.2 billion in damage and losses in Jamaica is just the latest reminder that Caribbean states remain on the front line of a climate crisis that we did not create. Yet, headline figures tell only part of that story. When damage and losses are disaggregated and examined at the sector level, the true consequences become clear. The result? Changed life chances, setbacks to our hard-fought development, reduced competitiveness, and increasing pressure on public resources. At the same time, we face a wider set of interconnected challenges and opportunities. Geopolitical uncertainty, supply chain disruptions, technological transformation, and increasing competition for development financing are reshaping the environment in which Caribbean governance and institutions operate. This really requires us to think differently about resilience and also to promote self-reliance. Resilience must be understood as a strategic governance, development, and economic imperative. It must shape how we plan, invest, and govern. This is especially important as development financing becomes more constrained and official development assistance declines. Maximizing available resources, strengthening disaster risk financing, and embedding resilience into investment decisions will be critical to safeguarding development gains. These realities provide the context for CDM 14, convened under the theme CDM Road to Resilience, Checkpoint 2026, Sustainable Communities, Resilient Sectors, and Safer States. And the emphasis on resilient sectors is intentional. For 25 years, the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy has placed sector leadership and empowerment at the center of resilience building. Since 2007, we've worked alongside education, agriculture, tourism, health, and civil society partners to strengthen sector resilience. The CDM strategy to 2030 deepens that approach through expanded sector engagement with energy, water, the private sector, and a stronger focus on finance, economic development, and disaster risk financing. So CDM 14 will provide a wide-ranging examination of sector resilience. It is an opportunity to assess progress, identify remaining gaps, and align around practical actions that accelerate recovery outcomes. It will also explore how emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, can strengthen decision-making, risk analysis, and preparedness while ensuring that planning remains grounded in strategic foresight and long-term thinking. More importantly, resilience must remain people-centered. Our objective is not more sophisticated systems. It is safer communities, protected livelihoods, continuity of essential services, and expanded opportunities for current and future generations. As we approach CDMA's 35th anniversary in September of 2026, we reflect on regional achievements. Governments, communities, regional institutions, development partners, academia, civil society, and the private sector have worked together to strengthen the Caribbean's capacity to manage risk and to respond to crises. That collaboration remains one of our region's greatest strengths. The challenges ahead demand even greater ambition. The conversation at CDM 14 will therefore help to shape the next chapter of Caribbean resilience by strengthening our partnerships, deepening cross-sectoral collaboration, generating new ideas, and advancing practical solutions that deliver tangible benefits for our people. Importantly, CDM 14 includes a dedicated youth conference, ensuring that the next generation has both a voice and a space in shaping the resilience agenda. Together, we have both the opportunity and the responsibility to build sustainable communities, resilient sectors, and safer lives. I thank you again for your presence this morning and look forward to welcoming you all back to Guyana for CDM 14. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz. We're so proud of you as you continue to lead CDM at this important juncture. And speaking of woman power, yes, we acknowledge all of our men in the room, and we thank you for walking alongside and supporting us women. And speaking of women power, of course, you know that Guyana has nominated for the post of Secretary General of the United Nations, our very own Carolyn Rodriguez Burkett. And so we'd like to also acknowledge this nomination and wish her the very, very best as Guyana aims really high. And of course, we look forward to the support of the region as well. So Liz, of course, has set the tone for what we can expect not just today, but certainly in the months to come as we count down to December, Andrea.
We're certainly looking forward to it. We're looking forward to welcoming everyone. The executive director squarely put on the table a number of those issues, recognizing that we are working together with sectors and various entities to advance resilience. And certainly we recognize that all of you do have a role to play in this very important agenda.
And we hope that you've already started to fill in the required information. Of course, it's not just a program that you were given. This is the opportunity for you to register early so that you can partner with CDM in the lead up to December. So, don't put it in your bag and take it away. Fill it up and return it at the front desk so that we can begin compiling your information. But a checkpoint, and we see a checkpoint displayed on the stage there. It is certainly an opportunity to reflect, to assess, to chart the path ahead. So we need all of our ministries across the region, all of our businesses, our communities, every institution. We all have a role to play in creating a stronger Caribbean as we come together to talk about managing disasters across the region.
Well, certainly when you think about a checkpoint, we know we who love car racing, we know that's the point where you do all the things that are necessary for the next leg of the race. And usually at that checkpoint, you're doing all the checks, you're changing tires, you're doing all those wonderful things. And usually when the persons come out of that pit, oh my goodness, they are taking on the race. So this becomes the opportunity for us to do that. We're at this checkpoint. And when we come out of this process, we are going to be taking resilience forward in the Caribbean region.
And we can look forward to a presentation, Guyana the Helm, leading the Caribbean's next resilience chapter. Also resilience as statecraft, governing at the speed of risk. And then inside Checkpoint 2026, building the architecture of a resilient Caribbean. Still to come this morning, we're going to have an executive finance dialogue. We know that financing the future, it is important, but we're going to talk through risk and capital and Caribbean resilience and so much more. Still to come as we launch the CDM 14, the road to resilience. And now, earlier we mentioned that Guyana is proudly hosting CDM 14 in a couple of months. And we're so pleased to be part of the regional conversation that is going to shape the Caribbean's future. And we're now going to hear from someone who is going to ensure that we pull out all the stops to host all of you come December. So, Andrea? All right, so I get the pleasure of introducing. I was allowing our beautiful guest, but she says, you know, you're Guyane, so you get a chance to do that for your own. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join us now as we invite Director General of the Civil Defense Commission, Colonel Retired Nazrul Hussain, as he delivers remarks as we launch CDM 14.
I stand on protocol observed, but I like to tell stories. So the story goes, whenever we have cricket in Guyana, we have rains. So we blame the rain on the cricket. And then when we have too much rain, we have floods. So we blame the government for that flood. And so CDM teaches us to stop the blame gaming and to take full responsibilities. I recognize my Prime Minister, who's the subject minister for disaster management, and I'd like to give a special welcome to all our overseas delegates and participants. It is a profound honor to welcome each and every one of you to this official launch and partnership breakfast. As I said, it's a new thing, and I hope it catches on because you can leave home earlier, beat the traffic, and get some breakfast before you start the work. So this conference, as it was stated, will be hosted in December, and as Guyana being the host country, we're working selflessly to ensure that we have a successful conference. Today's gathering is a commitment and declaration that Guyana is ready, not simply to host this conversation, but to lead it. And more than that, to lead it in a way that lifts every Caribbean nation alongside with us. We stand at a defining moment. Over the past decade, the impacts of climate change have ceased to be projections. They are lived experiences. We are enduring more intense rainfall, prolonged droughts, stronger storms, coastal erosion, widespread flooding, wildfires, rising temperatures, and increasing threats to food security, water systems, energy infrastructure, and public health. These are not Guyana's challenges alone. They are a regional burden, and they demand a shared and strategic response. As Guyana progresses, we have endeavored not to measure progress by GDP alone, but by our ability to protect our people, to safeguard our investments, and to ensure that the gains of development are not erased by disaster. It is from that conviction that Guyana steps forward, not only as a host, but as a partner and a platform for the entire Caribbean. We are ready. Guyana has been investing substantively in early warning systems, emergency preparedness infrastructure, hazard monitoring, climate adaptation frameworks, and community resilience programs. As we diversify our economy across agriculture, tourism, energy, technology, and manufacturing, resilience has been embedded into the architecture of our national development. Resilience is our safeguard. For us, this is what it means to be at the helm, not to steer alone, but to chart a course that every community, every sector, every state in our region can safely follow. Through CDM 14, Guyana is committed to opening real pathways for CARICOM member states to access knowledge, resources, innovation, and partnerships that strengthens their own resilience. We acknowledge the role of our development partners gathered here today. Your financial, logistical, and technical contributions have been essential to recovery in communities across the region in the aftermath of disasters. Disaster resilience is not only a governmental responsibility, it is a business imperative and a remarkable opportunity to improve our states. Every storm that disrupts supply chain, every flood that halts production, every disaster that displaces community is a reminder that investing in resilience is investing in our economic continuity. We invite you to deepen your commitment through CDM 14 to fund innovation, co-develop climate-smart infrastructure, and be active architects of a more resilient Caribbean economy. We also affirm the indispensable role of our youth. The generation that will inherit the climate future must also help to shape the climate response. CDM 14 will provide meaningful platforms to elevate youth leadership, to amplify innovative thinking, and to ensure that the voices of tomorrow are present in the decisions being made today. The government of Guyana, through the Civil Defense Commission, stands fully committed to strengthening our collaboration with CARICOM, CDM, the UN system, the CDB, academia, civil society, and the private sector. We are not here to lead from a distance. We are here to work alongside, to share resources, share knowledge, and share the responsibility of building a region that is prepared for whatever comes next. As we launch CDM 14, our ambition is clear. We want to leave a legacy, one defined by a stronger regional partnership, robust and tested disaster risk management systems, innovation that reaches the most vulnerable communities, and leaders in government, business, and civil society who are empowered to act. Above all, we want to leave a legacy of collective action because the Caribbean has always been most powerful when we work together. Our region has demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of adversity time and time again. But the scale and complexity of today's challenges demand more than resilience as a virtue. We must institutionalize resilience as a principle of governance, as a framework for investment, and a standard in planning and a culture of daily life. Guyana is proud and honored to stand at the helm of this effort. We are clear-eyed about what it means. It means carrying a responsibility, not just for ourselves, but for the region. Together as partners, as neighbors, as a people, let us write the next chapter of Caribbean resilience. Let us build a Caribbean that is safer, stronger, more climate resilient, and ready for the next generations to come. I thank you very much.
And thank you, Colonel Hussein. Guyana sounds ready, don't they? Thank you so much.
Oh, we are always ready, Andrea. And you know, as Director General was sharing a moment ago, I was remembering before CDM became CDM, it was CDERA, right? And so the fundamental shift that is taking place and the trajectory that the agency is on, it augurs well. And so we certainly look forward to hosting CDM 14.
Of course, we recognize that, well, response is important as an agency, that we have to work in all of the phases of disaster management. We have to prepare, we have to mitigate, we also have to respond when necessary, but we also have to recover, and we have to recover in a way that it is timely. It also reduces the susceptibility to being harmed, and we are able not only to build back better, but to bounce forward more quickly.
So I'm hearing that, we're treating resilience, it is a cost. It's not a cost after disaster, but certainly an investment in the event of a disaster.
I think you had a little peek at my presentation. Let's hold it for the presentation.
That's right. All right. So as we prepare for Andrea's presentation, which is going to come up shortly, I know we've had some food for thought. And so as we continue to think, to plan, and of course the buzzwords of resilience, for collaboration, for conversation, for building the momentum, we're now going to invite the very talented Michael Smith on the steel pan to perform for us. And he's just at the entrance. He was giving us some background music as you enjoyed your Guyanese pepper pot. Maybe you just had some fruit fresh from our farmlands. But now you get to enjoy Mr. Smith in the full on the steel pan as we make all of our Caribbean countries and territories feel welcome, all of you as part of CDM, as we now enjoy Mr. Smith on the steel pan.
Thank you so much for that beautiful rendition. Let's give him another round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our next speaker, Brigadier Retired Mark Phillips, the Prime Minister of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Honorable Mark Phillips is a distinguished military leader. He served for more than 30 years in the Guyana Defense Force and rose to the rank of Chief of Staff. He is a graduate of the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, and has undertaken advanced studies in public management, defense, and security. Since assuming office in August 2020, he has played a central role in advancing Guyana's national development agenda, including resilience, infrastructure, energy, and sustainable development initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Prime Minister to deliver the keynote address, Resilience as Statecraft, Governing at the Speed of Risk.
Thank you, our chairperson. Please be seated. Senior Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, Minister Kwame McCoy, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Executive Director, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, Ms. Elizabeth Riley, Permanent Secretary, Office of the Prime Minister, Dr. Alfred King, Director General of the Civil Defense Commission, Colonel Nazrul Hussain, Dr. Gobin Ganga, Governor of the Bank of Guyana, Ms. Gillian Charles Gollop, Vice President, the Caribbean Development Bank, Mr. Alistair Rutledge, President and General Manager, ExxonMobil Guyana Limited, Director General, Civil Aviation Authority of Guyana, Lieutenant Colonel Egbert Field, heads of government agencies, members of the private sector, Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mr. Budram, Deputy Executive Director of CDM, Lieutenant Colonel Craig, partners in disaster management, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media all, good morning. It is a pleasure to join you for the launch of the 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management and to welcome our regional partners to Guyana. Since 2026, this conference has served as the Caribbean's premier gathering for advancing resilience and disaster risk management. It draws together governments, regional institutions, development partners, the private sector, academia, youth, and civil society around a common purpose. This December, from the 7th to the 12th, Georgetown will host that gathering under the theme CDM, Road to Resilience, Checkpoint 2026, Resilient Sectors, Sustainable Communities, Safer States. This idea of a checkpoint is deliberate. It asks the region to pause and take honest measure of where we stand with regard to the readiness of our institutions and the soundness of the financing that must support them when the next shock arrives. It is a useful checkpoint that helps us record our progress and name the gaps that remain, with a commitment to closing them on a clear timeline. The theme set for December points to the outcome we are working toward. ensuring our sectors and communities can absorb a shock and keep functioning so we can keep our people safe. That full assessment takes place in December, yet it begins here, this morning, at this launch. Today's event positions resilience as a development and economic priority and builds early momentum ahead of December, while opening the conversation between governments and the institutions that finance resilience. The program before us reflects that intent. It previews what delegates can expect in December and opens a dialogue on risk and capital before culminating in the unveiling of the official CDM 14 monument and the formal countdown to the conference. By the time we leave this room, the road to December will already be on the way. Ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a time of considerable pressure. As Caribbean states, we're continuously contending with climate volatility, economic shocks, infrastructure vulnerabilities, public health threats, supply chain disruptions, and rapidly evolving technological and security risk. These pressures most times overlap and compound, testing governments' capacity to respond within ever shorter windows of time. This is why I have chosen to speak this morning about resilience as statecraft. For much of our history, disaster management was treated as a function that only activated after an event occurred. That understanding is no longer adequate to the world we govern. Resilience now sits at the center of how a country is run and touches various aspects of our economy, infrastructure, security, and long-term development. To govern well in this environment is to govern at the speed of risk, anticipating threats before they mature, investing ahead of need, coordinating across borders, and acting with resolve when the moment demands it. The windows in which decisions must be taken are narrowing, and the cost of acting late rises with every passing season. Approached in this way, resilience becomes a matter of competitiveness as much as protection. A country that can keep its ports and its power running through a shock and its public services available to those who depend on them is one that investors trust and that its people can rely on. Equally, infrastructure built to withstand the hazards of our region retains its values over time. Early warning systems that reach every community lower the human and economic costs of an event. Further, the steady adoption of new technology from satellite data to improve forecasting gives governments more time to act before a threat becomes a crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, Guyana understands the weight of this responsibility. Our economy is expanding, and our energy sector is growing. Our standing within the region has risen alongside that growth. Much of our population and economic life, however, is centered along the coast, where the effects of a serious hazard would be felt most acutely. As we build new infrastructure and expand our energy capacity, the task of protecting those assets and the communities around them grows every year. For us, resilience and development are intertwined because neither can be secured without the other. The Civil Defense Commission, our National Disaster Management Agency, and the national co-host of CDM 14 has carried this work steadily forward. In 2025, the CDC commissioned its new multipurpose building at its headquarters in Georgetown, strengthening our country's capacity to coordinate in times of emergency. Again, in 2025, Guyana hosted the Mechanism for Disaster Cooperation Exercise, MECODEX 2025, which brought regional partners together to test our collective response. With the support of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Commission developed an early warning for all implementation plan to advance the goal of ensuring that every person receives a timely warning. Our Parliament passed the Oil Pollution Prevention, Preparedness, Response and Responsibility Act, giving Guyana a legal framework matched to the realities of an energy-producing economy. Officers of the CDC also receive multi-sectoral training in disaster risk management, both at home and abroad. This work continues in 2026. Our national budget supports a program of disaster risk management aligned with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, the Sustainable Development Goals, our own low-carbon development strategy 2030, and the CDC's strategic plan for 2025 to 2030. This year, the CDC will implement the Oil Pollution Act and advance new disaster risk management legislation. The National Oil Spill Contingency Plan will be updated, and our multi-hazard early warning systems will be expanded through geographic information systems, satellite data, and information and communications technology. A gas-to-energy emergency response contingency plan is in development, and new emergency response facilities at Letem and Madhya, as well as the multipurpose bonds in Georgetown, will be brought into full operation. Investment in the CDC's people runs through everything, because systems are only as strong as those who operate them. Taken together, these measures give Guyana a more complete legal and operational footing for the risks that accompany an expanding economy, and they prepare the ground for the responsibilities we will carry as host in December 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, in all this, it is pertinent to note that no country secures resilience on its own, and no single budget can finance it. This is where partnership becomes essential, and it is why this morning's program places financing at its center. Capital for Resilience does its greatest work when it is well prepared in advance of disaster. Regional risk pooling and prearranged finance allow a country to respond and recover quickly, sparing its people the long delays that follow when resources have to be assembled from scratch. The presence of the Caribbean Development Bank and CCRIF SPC speaks to that principle, and private investors must be drawn more fully into the work alongside them. Therefore, it is my firm belief that the dialogue this program opens on risk, capital, and Caribbean resilience is among the most consequential we can pursue. Ladies and gentlemen, partnership of this kind extends well beyond finance. The strength of our regional response rests on shared standards and joint exercises, as well as the steady exchange of knowledge between agencies that face common hazards. MECODEX 2025, which Guyana was honored to host, showed the value of that practice. When our agencies train and plan together, the region can respond as one when an event strikes a single member. Development partners and regional institutions bring capacities that no single government holds, and so does the private sector. The work before us is to bring those capacities into one coordinated effort. The Caribbean has long understood that our security is shared. When one of our states is weakened, the region is weakened with it. The coordinating role of CDM and its partnership with the Civil Defense Commission in hosting CDM 14 gives that understanding practical form. Guyana assumes the duty of host, mindful of its responsibility to the wider Caribbean community. Guyana does not approach this role lightly. Our growing importance within the region carries with it an obligation to contribute to our own preparedness and to the strength of the wider Caribbean alike. We intend to meet that obligation through the example of our institutions and the partnerships we are building, and by sharing openly what we learn along the way. The leadership the region expects of us is leadership we are prepared to give. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning then marks a beginning. The road to CDM 14 opens here and runs through December, when the region will gather in Georgetown to take its measure and chart what comes next. Guyana is proud to host that journey and is steadfast in its commitment to the safety of our people and our Caribbean neighbors. I wish the organizers every success in the months of preparation ahead, and I look forward to welcoming the region to Guyana. I thank you.
So thank you so very much, Honorable Prime Minister, for that presentation. And indeed, resilience is a statecraft governing at the speed of risk. You've given us to set the tone as well, not just for the conference, but also areas in which Guyana is leading in terms of resilience. And now we've come to a very special moment of the launch of the 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management. Ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing to unveil the CDM 14 monument, and we will invite back on stage to assist us in this moment the Honorable Prime Minister and the Executive Director of CDM to do us the honors as we, this would be the image that will inform all of our communication materials in the lead up to December. And so PM and our Executive Director, Elizabeth Riley, will do the honors and unveil the CDM 14 monument in 3, 2, 1. Here. There we go. I now also invite, please don't leave just yet, our Deputy Executive Director, Colonel Craig, Andrea. We're going to invite you also to join us at this moment. Director General Colonel Hussein, our host, you're also invited. And we heard from PM that finance is key when we talk resilience. Our Senior Minister of Finance perhaps can also join us for this photo op. Yes. Our local and regional leaders as we count down to CDM 14, the road to resilience. Hashtag CDM14 as we use this image moving forward. So thank you very much, PM, Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director, Director General. And remaining on stage will be Andrea. So thank you very much as we continue with our launch program this morning here at the Pegasus. This is the 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, the acronym CDM14, the road to resilience. So having unveiled our monument, having heard from our Honorable Prime Minister as resilience as statecraft governing at the speed of risk, let's now go inside Checkpoint 2026. What is going to be required? How do we build the architecture of a resilient Caribbean? I invite back on stage Andrea to take us through this segment of the program.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Inside Checkpoint 2026. Remember, this is an important stop as we go on the journey to resilience. So this is the experience review inside Checkpoint 2026. In 1983, a passenger aircraft experienced a catastrophic failure because of a component that cost less than $1. Not an engine, not the wings, a tiny bolt. Engineers later discovered that the failure of that single component triggered a chain reaction throughout the aircraft. The lesson was indeed simple. Complex systems rarely fail because of one major event. They fail when we underestimate the importance of connections, building everything together. Connections which hold everything together. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you today that the Caribbean is one of the most interconnected systems in the world. Our tourism depends on functioning airports. Airports depend on power. Power depends on infrastructure. Infrastructure depends on planning. Planning depends on leadership. Leadership depends on partnerships, and partnerships depend on people to execute and bind everything together. And when one link breaks, the effects ripple across economies, communities, and generations. And that is why comprehensive disaster management matters. The Caribbean is the second most hazard-prone region in the world. We live with risk that threaten our lives, our livelihoods, and development aspirations. Moreover, we recognize that we are in a polycrisis, where multiple major crises occur simultaneously and interact with one another, creating effects that are more severe than the sum of the individual problems. From climate change, volcanoes, earthquakes, and other hazard impacts, geopolitical tensions and conflicts, economic and technological disruptions, the strength of an interconnected world also expose Caribbean vulnerabilities. That is why comprehensive disaster management matters. Interconnectedness cannot be managed in silos. It needs integration. And CDM is an all hazards, all phases, all people's approach to the management of risk. It is an integrated approach to building resilience to the multiple and cascading crises that we face. We secure it together, every nut and every bolt. So, CDM 14 is where the Caribbean's resilience agenda is going to be negotiated, shaped, financed, and accelerated. This is the region's premier resilience marketplace. This is where ideas will become policies, policies will become investments, and investments will become impact. The 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, therefore, is more just than a regional meeting. It is strategically important because it is that forum where governance, regional institutions, development partners, the private sector, academia, and civil society come together to agree on priorities for building a more resilient Caribbean. This is where our resilience agenda is negotiated through dialogue and consensus building on the most pressing risks that face Caribbean states, including climate change, other disaster impacts, and emerging polycrisis challenges. It is shaped through the exchange of knowledge, innovations, and best practices that we all bring that will inform the policies and the programs. And it is financed by connecting national and regional priorities and development partners, climate funds, and investment opportunities that can turn plans into actions. And finally, we recognize that it's accelerated by partnerships, commitments, and coordinated action that more resilience initiatives can be undertaken from concept to implementation. So this is the Caribbean's premier platform for transforming resilience ambitions into practical, funded, and collaborative solutions that safeguard lives, livelihoods, and sustainable development across the Caribbean region. And that is why you need to be there, and that is why the persons online need to be at CDM 14. We understand that a resilient Caribbean is not just simply a safer Caribbean. It is a more investable Caribbean. It is a more competitive Caribbean. It is a Caribbean where we don't just aspire, but we certainly achieve. And it's a Caribbean that is capable of protecting growth. It is also capable of attracting capital, and it is also capable of sustaining our development gains. One may ask, what is the cost of resilience? Because we recognize that resilience takes investment and often significant resources. We want to be able to have investments to reduce disaster and climate risks, to strengthen the ability of our communities and our systems to withstand shocks and recover more quickly when we have events occurring. It includes investment in risk-informed planning and governance, early warning systems and climate services, resilient infrastructure and building standards, ecosystem protection and restoration, social protection, because people matter, and they must be able to absorb the shocks that they will face. It calls for emergency preparedness and response capacity, public education and community resilience program. Yes, it will require significant investment. Now ask yourself the more important question: what is the cost of not having it? What is the cost of not being resilient? For the Caribbean, the costs of inaction are evident in the billions of dollars from hurricanes, floods, droughts, coastal erosion, and other hazards. Disasters can destroy infrastructure, disrupt tourism and agriculture, increase public debt, reverse development gains, and disproportionately affect the most vulnerable of people. So whilst we require significant investment, we have to remember that for every dollar that is invested in disaster risk reduction and resilience, we save multiple dollars in avoided losses, response costs, and recovery expenditures. So, the cost of resilience, I put to you, is the price of preparedness today. The cost of inaction is the price of disaster tomorrow. For the Caribbean, resilience is not a luxury. It's a development necessity and one of the smartest investments that we can make. So, as we go into the CDM Road to Resilience Checkpoint 2026, we're going to be looking at resilient sectors, sustainable communities, and safer states. This is going to be a strategic forum where leaders, regional leaders, will align priorities and commitments. It's going to be a knowledge exchange where we can bring our ideas as practitioners and innovators and experts and share solutions that are already working. It will be an investment platform where we can have resilience initiatives that can attract partnerships. And we are having a deal room at the CDM, and we want you to be a part of that, where you can get the technical support and the financing. It's going to be a catalyst for action, where commitments made can become actions that are implemented throughout the region. So, we will seek to accelerate regional resilience coming out of the CDM, catalyze that innovation and knowledge exchange. We will seek to enable integrated self-sustaining solutions and strengthen regional solidarity and action. Honorable Prime Minister, you said very clearly, we can't develop alone. We have to do it together. And so we want CDM 14 to be a contribution to that process. So just to give you a little bit of a sneak preview of some of the things that we're going to be having, we're going to be looking at having those panel discussions, the cutting-edge insights, interactive sessions. We're going to be having actionable takeaways, networking opportunities, inspiring keynotes. We started that already today, and we look forward to having more in the CDM. But there will be more. You will have this opportunity to build your capacity through the professional development sessions. And we are going to be building the next generation of leaders through the youth in CDM. And we look forward for you being there and also to bring that next generation along. We'll be having a film festival where we are going to display, or we're going to be able to view disaster risk management films. And we're also going to be having the Resilience Village and the Expo. So, CDM is not asking organizations here or online to sponsor an event. We are inviting organizations to shape the future resilience landscape of the Caribbean. We can do it together. So, today, as we do this reveal, we want to encourage partners to influence regional conversations, to partner with us in showcasing those solutions and innovations, to connect with ministers and policymakers, to also build relationships with our regional institutions, to demonstrate leadership in resilience and sustainable development, and position your organization before that highly targeted audience of decision makers, so you can make a difference in the region. The organizations in this room have an opportunity to decide whether they will observe the resilience conversation or help lead it. Ask yourself, years from now, when the Caribbean looks back at the decisions that strengthen our resilience journey, were you in the room? Were you in the room because many of those conversations would have started at CDM 14. So, CDM 14 is not about preparing for the next hurricane season. It is about preparing for the next decade, because the decisions that we make today will determine whether our countries merely recover from shocks or emerge stronger because of them. Every generation is given a defining responsibility. Many years ago with our forefathers, 60 years of independence for Guyana, it was nation building. For others, it was economic transformation. For ours, it may very well be resilience. Because we know that the question is not whether the next disruption will come. The question is whether we have built the partnerships necessary to withstand it. And CDM 14 is where those enduring partnerships will begin. Join me, therefore, as we view the video for CDM 14, the trailer. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a crossroads. join us in making the very next best step. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Andrea. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So Andrea has definitely opened our minds as to what and how the countdown will look from now until December 7. And our next segment on the program is going to give us the specifics of what our country, our CDM member countries and territories, we are mainstreaming resilience into national development across the region in our budgets across all of the sectors. And now Michael Smith is going to lead us into our next item. Thank you once again. Let's give a round of applause as I now invite to the stage three distinguished leaders who will take us through the next item on our launch agenda. Please welcome Ms. Gillian Charles Gollop, Vice President, Corporate Services at the Caribbean Development Bank, Gillian Gola, Chief Operations Officer at CRIF SPC, and Dr. Gobind Ganga, Governor of the Bank of Guyana, as we get ready to have the conversation Financing the Future, Risk, Capital, and Caribbean Resilience. Yes, how do we finance resilience in this era of escalating climate shocks, economic uncertainty, and rising vulnerability? Well, that's going to be the question that's going to drive our next conversation. Welcome to the Executive Finance Dialogue, part of the official launch of CDM 14, where we move beyond risk awareness to the real challenge, how resilience gets funded. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Executive Finance Dialogue. Can we give our guests a round of applause as we begin the conversation on financing the future, risk, capital, and Caribbean resilience. So we've heard from the earlier presentations, distinguished guests, that already the Caribbean is simultaneously facing, we heard, climate shocks, fiscal pressures, infrastructure vulnerabilities, and economic uncertainty. So from each of your perspectives and your positions, do you believe that The Caribbean region is financing resilience at the scale and the speed that's required for the future that we are entering. I'll begin with our ladies first.
Good morning and thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'm honored first to be here on behalf of the Caribbean Development Bank to represent on this very important regional discussion. I also want to acknowledge first my colleague, Dr. Isaac Solomon, who is to be here. I'm here in his stead. He's our Vice President of Operations, and he sends his best regards and his regrets as he could not be here due to a family bereavement. I also want to say that on behalf of our President, Daniel Best, and our Cari Bank team, we really want to extend congratulations to CDM and the government of Guyana on this official launch of the CDM 14. CDB is proud to be a strong sponsor for the CDM conference, and we are in close alignment on the road to resilience. So the short answer, Michelle, is no, the Caribbean is not yet financing resilience at the scale or at the speed that's required. I would say from CDB's latest estimates, it shows that the region needs about $14 billion annually to address climate impacts. Yet less than 10% of that is currently being mobilized. And that gap is already increasing not only fiscal risk, but economic and social risk. The direction that we now need to really focus on is more action. That resilience can no longer sit at margins of development planning. It must shape how we prioritize investment, how we protect essential services, and build long-term economic stability. The regional engagements like this one is really critical for our region's future. And I want to acknowledge, as the Honorable Prime Minister Brigadier Phillips stated in his remarks, the road to resilience indeed does go beyond financing. And the Executive Director, Liz Hurley, she also said in her remarks, and it really resonated, that assessing where we are now, planning a clear path forward, is a part of our comprehensive disaster management. And it's the first step to improving our potential for success. So I would just add a couple more points before I pass on. First off, the investments that we do need to make to close the infrastructure gaps, they must not only address current disaster or current needs, but they also must reduce vulnerability. They must improve preparedness, and they must also create lasting development value. The issue is not only the mobilizing of the capital, which we're going to speak about today, but it's deploying it better, and that's why the management discussions and the leadership discussions that are going to go on at the CDM is going to be so important as we plan. We are also planning that through not only the regional organizations, but also the fiscal planning that governments do, the project designs, the readiness, the response, and the recovery. And so I would just close off by saying that is why our partnerships via CDB's instruments, like the EU-funded Caribbean Action for Resilience Enhancement, which is a CARE program, the support that we partner with Julian here on the CRIF SPC, which is premium support to regional governments, the disaster risk reduction grants, things like our climate resilient investments, and immediate response loans really do matter. They help countries reduce risk, and they prepare better to help them respond faster and to access liquidity when shocks occur. So CDB is responding by scaling climate and resilient finance and strengthening project preparation, which is helping countries to build better for the future.
Thanks, Jillian, CDB Vice President. We're going to cross to the other Jillian on stage, Chief Operations Officer at CRIF SPC. As we ask the question, if the region is financing resilience at the scale and speed that we require for the kind of future that we're talking about.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed, and a pleasure representing CRIF today. Just a few points to complement Jillian. First of all, from where we sit, yes, we agree the speed, the scale is not sufficient in 2026 as we look forward. However, we have to recognize some very meaningful strides. And I would say this when we consider today the coverage levels, the insurance coverage levels, the availability and the investment in a range of disaster risk financing instruments, but also the strategies and the maturing risk management strategies that we see in countries across the region. And I compare this to the performance of maybe even our sister risk pools in Africa and the Pacific. The Caribbean is way ahead. That, however, I mean, we also have to note that some countries are far ahead than others, and that actually is the importance of CRIF, which was always a regional response for disaster risk management and financing and building resilience. So CRIF, for those of you who are not aware, would have been, instrumental, I think almost 19, going to 20 years now, in pooling risk, and that is through different regions, Central America and the Caribbean, different perils, earthquake, tropical cyclone, now rainfall, drought, others. But it is with the intention to be able to have insurance coverage available at an affordable cost for all members in the region and Central America. That remains really, really important, and I just wanted to highlight a few points around that. When we look at the cost, the escalating cost of natural disasters, we've heard about it this morning, but just reflecting on Beryl and Melissa, you're looking at between 40 to 55% losses, and that's the impact, losses as compared to GDP. Essentially wiping out decades of development in just a matter of hours. So the reliance on, post-disaster aid or post-disaster borrowing is not an effective strategy at all. It really does undermine long-term growth and stability. And I wanted to make, a little bit of a point around CRIF and insurance coverage. I think the reason that CRIF has continued to see a lot of growth in coverage levels, it's one central value proposition. It's the speed of payouts, right? So pre-financing, liquidity, having that liquidity in place, the certainty, the predictability, it's not really a luxury, it's a lifeline in a way. And, insurance buys you time. It allows you to get the wheels turning after disaster. That becomes very important. And just also one last point, in terms of what's happening and what we're seeing, risk layering is working when we compare where we are today to just maybe even 5 years ago. Many of our members are now not just relying on parametric insurance, but are also looking at cat bonds, contingency lines, and again, recognizing the partnerships that exist within the space. We have, not just the donors, the multilaterals, the financiers, but all of the other institutions like CDM and others that truly do support, this awareness and this recognition, so much so that when we compare insurance coverages pre-COVID to just even the COVID years, I mean, as a region, we should be so proud to say that, all countries renewed their increased coverage with the support of donors. The CDB in particular continues to support CRIF on special initiatives. I think the mainstay products are really, really well established and understood. The political will, the political support is there. But again, lots more to do as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jillian. We continue here with the Executive Finance Dialogue, Financing the Future. We're talking through risk, capital and the Caribbean resilience. And now we're going to hand over to Dr. Gobind Ganga, Governor of the Bank of Guyana. Governor, we're hearing there is more to be done by the Caribbean collectively, but of course strides are being made. Coming home to Guyana, you know, we're experiencing massive economic transformation. How is resilience being integrated into national development planning?
Good morning, everyone. And obviously, I agree with the past two speakers. So really speaking, I shouldn't be adding too much. Anyhow, the bottom line, are we financing for the future? I don't think so. Because obviously, we haven't been preparing ourselves for the future. We have to move from a reactive culture to one of anticipation. That by itself requires not just financing, but other aspects that will require us to build resilience. If you look at what we are doing in Guyana currently, you look at our infrastructure, they are being built to last not for another 10 years, but for another 100 years. Look at our road networks, look at the trenches that are being built, they are now being concrete, etc. That is just an example. But when we look at countries that are disaster prone, and you look at what they have been doing, then we look back and say, what have we been doing? Take a country like Japan. It's not because it is financially more, I would say, better than anywhere else. But they have been preparing. When a disaster happens, you don't find them putting out their hands or a bowl out there. They are able to deal with the disaster because they have anticipated it and they have done. Not too far back, I mean, if you look at Mexico, they have also been doing that. Hey, recently Jamaica had gone through a disaster. They were able, through CRIF and other insurance mechanism, also with the contingency funds. They have been preparing. So preparation is very important in terms of our culture, moving away from reactive to anticipation. The future, obviously, is what we need to look at, and that is how you can build resilience. So financing, I mean, I could give you, I have about 7 pages here, and everybody knows what we need to do. But we have to be careful. Careful with what? Yes, regionalism is very important, and our partnership is a necessity for us to build resilience. But we also have to look carefully on what we are doing. We have many who are building all sorts of funds, all sorts of bonds in terms of financing. Most of that is not regional. Our capacity and our ability, the wherewithal to build resilience come from our partnership. And that is what is important. I'll stop there for now.
So, and I'll give you the other question because I'll also ask our other panelists to weigh in on it. So how do, realistically speaking, how do heavily indebted states realistically increase resilience investment while, they've got to manage their other fiscal pressures? We're going to begin with you, Governor, and move down the line.
Well, obviously, there is need for a regional fund. Currently, I believe there are about 2 or 3 countries that are doing their own. That is very expensive. It is not a resilience for the future. It is trying to build insurance for your own. But we look at, for example, currently, we find that the V20, that is a group of vulnerable countries, they are working on what we call a lifeline fund with a target of $1 billion. I'm not selling it here, but I'm telling you what needs to be done in the region and what is being done in individual countries. Some of them have been putting out green bonds. Some have been putting on blue bonds. We have found quite a lot of people trying to raise funds. But once again, the funds are for individual countries. It's very expensive. If it is being done for the Caribbean, it will be cheaper, less work. We have to have the capacity also to do it. Regionally, it is easier, and it is far better. in terms of the scopes that we need to look at. So I believe while we need to raise funds, it needs to be done in a manner which is very, I would say, efficient, cost-effective, and it spreads across the region. So it has to be regional.
Thank you, Dr. Ganga. CDB, we'll go back to you to just perhaps follow up on what the Governor was just sharing. How important will institutional collaboration be to the region's resilience agenda? Let's just switch mics again, please.
Just quickly add to what was said just now. So the importance of these partnerships and raising funds that would support us, because if you think about the definition of resiliency, it's about being able to bounce back faster, right? And a lot of what Gillian G said just now resonates, because sometimes we may have to recover when a disaster hits. It's going to have damage. So it's very, very important that raising funds through things like the Caribbean, the CARICOM Development Fund, and the Caribbean Resiliency Fund, which is actually a regional fund that's being supported by a number of different regional and international organizations, as well as CDB, is going to support our ability to bounce back faster when resiliency hits. So yes, institutional collaboration is really fundamental to our ability to strengthen our resiliency. And I would have mentioned how much it takes for us to really be able to move the needle on developing stronger infrastructure. There's a big scale and there's a lot of cost complexity in the challenge that we face. And that work that needs to be done exceeds the capacity of any single government, any single multilateral development or private sector bank or any organization. And so our progress and success will really depend on, one, stronger alignment across policy, finance, data, implementation, and community action. And I think the Honorable Prime Minister mentioned that in his remarks. It is really, really important for us to recognize this is not a problem for one party to fix, one government to fix, one term to fix. We have to recognize we're all in this together, and we do need to represent and act together and plan for that future. Our progress is also, I would say, we're also seeing it in practice in relation to, for example, the bonds that we are seeing in terms of blue bonds, the collaboration with multilateral development banks, the joint guarantees that we're seeing, for example, CDB, as well as the MEGA, CAF, as well as the IDB, Inter-American Development Bank, recently launched the multi-regional debt swap guarantee, which is bringing four different banks, this is for the first time, 4 different multilaterals coming together to finance resiliency. And so what do those guarantees mean? I mean, it's great that AAA rated, AA rated entities are coming together to provide guarantees, but what that guarantee does is actually help to mobilize the very capital that is needed to build that resiliency. And what it does is, for a commercial bank, being able to be backed by a multilateral guarantee versus funding directly to a government which may not have a risk rating at all, a credit rating at all, improves that risk profile and makes it easier for that representation to fund or invest in the financing that's needed. And then we're helping to mobilize the local currency that's really sitting in our banks, right? Earning very little. So these partnerships are going to be really, really important, and that's what that collaboration is about. But as the Prime Minister said, it's not just about finance. It is about, finding ways to address the climate adaptation and mitigation initiatives. And supporting member countries is something that CDB addresses very strongly in terms of helping those member countries support regional development initiatives. And that's the recent messaging. If any of you listen to our annual meetings, we really resonated the point of not only to address the phase of resilience, we need to partner more. We're not just partnering with the multilaterals. We just signed also a $200 million equivalent first loss guarantee with the government of Canada. That guarantee enables us to double our investment in resiliency activities to help further support the region. And one of the other things, like I said, strengthening our institutions is important. Developing fit-for-purpose finance and implementation that actually reaches communities is also going to be part of how that collaboration is going to exist. And it's just not looking at what we can do, but also looking at some of the successful examples. There are examples like the debt for nature swaps that we have seen in Bahamas, Belize, Barbados. Those are examples that other governments can use and utilize those to help support those things. Nature-based solutions is also strengthening resiliency. Looking at all of those examples also will help support us building that resilient future. So the answer is definitely collaboration is really, really important for our resilient future.
Thank you. Thank you again, Gillian. We'll go to the closing off question because we were allotted 30 minutes for this executive dialogue, finance dialogue. We're down to the final 7 minutes already, and we're just touching the surface, really. But this is what the bigger conference in December will allow us to delve into with obviously some more time and more segments of the conference agenda, giving space to these kinds of conversations. But we want now to look ahead to the next 5, 10 years and perhaps hear from you as to, what gives you confidence that the Caribbean can successfully finance a more resilient future. And so we're going to begin with you, Chief Operations Officer for CRIF SPC, Gillian G., and then come to Dr. Ganga, and of course wrap up with the other Gillian on her inaugural visit to Guyana. We hear, but yes.
Thanks a lot. So just to pull together some points, in absolute reality of where we stand today, there are so many cascading, converging risks that impact all of our nations. We do recognize the fact that as of today, CRIF, when I speak of insurance, if we look at a little bit of the past to today and going forward, when we started, we had 16 members. Today, it's 39. We expect that to increase as CRIF goes from the sovereign level and goes a little bit down to the subnational level as we focus more on coverage for sectors, utilities, microfinance. The range of policyholders are certainly going to increase. And that comes with partnerships and support. When you're launching new insurance products, there is a general level of understanding. Even of parametric insurance today, there is really a good level of technical understanding. But as we move into sectors to really ensure that, coverage is adequate, that we are reducing that gap, that insurance protection gap, we do need to make sure that persons understand what financial instruments are there, how they work, how they complement each other, so the strategies as we move forward are more comprehensive. We have today 8 products. A few years ago, it was really just 3. Payouts are still made in 40 days, and that's the core value proposition, as I said. But to demonstrate in terms of what the future could look like, last year, CRIF seeded $1.4 billion in coverage, and this year, from June 1, it's $1.57 billion. That's actually a very, very impressive figure, and we expect that to increase, but it has to increase within as you say, partnerships, it is really central in financing resilience. It's central in planning and influencing that discussion of covering risk and better covering risk is important because it means, public-private sector partnerships, donor intervention is more targeted. And it's through that targeted support that we can see more of the countries, as well as the most vulnerable, beginning to benefit more and more as we look into the next 5 years.
Thank you, Dr. Ganga. And I know we didn't even touch on the role of the private sector. And in Guyana, the private sector is considered the engine of all that's happening. So perhaps I'd give you 30 seconds to just touch on the role of the private sector and hear your answer to whether the Caribbean can successfully finance a more resilient future.
The future is bright in that opportunity to expand on regional finance for resilience is expanding every day. Obviously, we can look at different asset class. Many entrepreneurs out there and investors, they are looking for climate resilient investment opportunities, such as, for example, resilient ports, renewable energy projects, etc. And these are all will strengthen resilience. The challenge is opportunities and ways and means how we can prepare these in a good package, in a transparent and investable way, and also be able to capture those investors that might be interested. We also have to look at other ways and means in terms of how we can create opportunities. Capital out there shouldn't just be capital that people want to invest in, but capital should be attached to resilience. And here is where that asset class comes in. So we need to look at finance from a different perspective. We need to look at these risks, how we can able to manage these risks, how we can able to pool these risks in such a way they are attractive investment opportunities. And obviously the region stands well because we do stand by our word to provide the wherewithal in terms of repayment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goben Ganga, this Governor for the Central Bank of Guyana here in Georgetown, Guyana. And we will conclude our executive finance dialogue with hearing your thoughts, Jillian.
Thank you so much. So first, I'd say my confidence is definitely building. We're seeing so much happening and evolving with the financing landscape in ways that are supporting our resiliency, and also we're seeing a lot more advocacy and action across the region, both within governments as well as non-governmental organizations, really pushing for our planning and our building our resiliency. We're also seeing how the MDBs, or multilateral development banks, are scaling finance and being very innovative in how they do it, with the guarantees, with all sorts of infrastructures, with climate bond issues, and where, CDB, as an example, just on the Swiss market, funded $110 million in Swiss francs. That's the first of its kind, specifically to develop to invest in sustainable finance initiatives across the Caribbean. And so you're seeing the strengthening of the political will, which is really, really important, and recognizing that what we are doing isn't just for a term. That political will is really going to be very, very important for our future. And that is what we really are going to need to be able to push the needle, that consistency. And the region, therefore, in closing, I say, have to continue to accelerate without distraction. Governments, multi-term governments have to commit, no matter which place you stand on, to being able to move forward in lockstep. And, reducing the fragmented efforts is important so that we are actually developing that investment agenda. I would just close by saying CDB as a regional organization, which is really owned by the member countries across the region, their role is really important as a catalytic financer, being able to bring all of those multilaterals, those organizations together to not only bring the financing, but provide the technical support. And that is what we're doing here. And what we are also doing is really working on building that pipeline of investments investment-ready projects that we can support and all other development banks can support. And we're seeing that happening. So I feel very, very confident, very, very optimistic. Our Carrie Bank family feels very, very optimistic that this is something that we're going to be able to continue to achieve with the political will and the focus that we're seeing happening. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause for our distinguished panelists? And, well, you couldn't have, technical, distinguished guests dealing with specifics and not wrap up within the 30 minutes. I'd like to thank them very much for participating in this executive finance dialogue. On our program, we do have a networking and partnership component. So if you've got any questions for any of them based on their presentations, we do encourage you to have that conversation with them. So again, thank you very much. And we'll now continue with the program as we invite you to take your seats in the audience as we inform you, everyone, that we're down to the final 2 items. So once more, we just looked at how resilience gets funded as part of our launch here today of CDM 14. And, we've heard from them that we've got to unlock this in a smarter, in a faster and more sustainable way so that we can finance resilience across the Caribbean. And so as Andrea rejoins me on the stage, we're down to our 2 remaining items on our official launch program, Andrea. And for those persons who perhaps said, well, I should have taken another serving of something that I saw on the buffet station, don't worry, we're going to wrap up just in time so that you can go have your lunch. But as we come down to the end, we're going to move now to the strategic partnership acceleration. So we've heard presentations, now we're going to move now to some real, the action items that we require from each other.
Absolutely, and we want to invite the Deputy Executive Director of CDM, Lieutenant Colonel Kester Craig, who is a son of the Guyana soil, to kindly give us that presentation. Colonel Craig looks sharp.
Thank you, Andrea and Michelle. I would like to stand on the protocols established, but permit me to acknowledge the Honorable Prime Minister, Senior Minister of Responsibility for Finance, Ministers of Government, CDM Executive Director, Permanent Secretaries. I saw the Budget Director here earlier. Friends, good morning. I'll be honest. When I was told I was the last speaker on this agenda before the vote of thanks, I considered keeping it very, very short. Then I remembered I'm Guyanese and I'm representing CDM, and we don't do anything halfway. So please hear me out and indulge. When disasters occurred in the Caribbean, the impacts are not only measured by the cost of the response efforts or the infrastructure losses. Our livelihoods are disrupted. Infrastructure and ecosystems are damaged. Families are displaced. And our education and health systems are interrupted. And development is derailed and delayed. We are constantly reminded that resilience requires investment. Investment in people, investment in sustainable development, and investment in the future of our country and our region. The Comprehensive Disaster Management Conference has served as that premier forum for advancing that investment. It is where partnerships are forged, innovations are shared, and regional priorities are really translated into practical actions. As we launch CDM 14, we do so at a time when the need for partnerships has never been greater. No single institution can address the complex challenges faced by disaster risk, climate change, and the growing socioeconomic vulnerabilities. And our success will depend on our ability to leverage collective strengths of our governments, regional organizations, international partners, the private sector, academia, and the civil society. So whether you are a national or regional agency strengthening coordination or building resilience, a financial institution supporting risk-informed investment, a company advancing social program and innovations, or a development partner financing resilience programs, your contribution matters. The Caribbean's resilient journey requires collective ownership. Today, I invite all stakeholders to move beyond expression of support and into concrete commitments. In this regard, please complete the partnership commitment form at the back of your program and leave them on the table, or you can leave it at the registration desk on your way out if you have an interest in not only supporting the CDM conference, but also building the wider resilience agenda in the region. Let us seize this opportunity to strengthen partnerships, mobilize resources, and advance solutions that will safeguard our people, our economies, and our future. Together, we can build the resilience of the Caribbean that we all deserve. See you all in December at the CDM conference right here in Georgetown, Guyana. And remember to complete the registration on our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Executive Director of CDM. And, just as he was concluding his presentation, our finance minister had to take his leave, but that was no indication that, Guyana is 100% behind the successful hosting of this CDM 14 in December.
I believe the finance minister went to increase the allocation.
Well, that conversation will take place immediately after the vote of thanks, because I can tell you the second highest person who makes that decision is still in the room and is happy to be hosting CDM in December. But ladies and gentlemen, we're almost at the end of our program where we've launched CDM 14. And so I think just to really bring the curtain down with the vote of thanks, I now invite forward Mr. Keith Goddard for the vote of thanks, after which we can then move between the tables for networking and partnership engagements.
Yes, really looking forward to this networking, so let's stick around. Keith?
Good morning, everybody. Breakfast is already finished, isn't it? Good morning. Okay, that's what I like. Like the speakers before me, I wish to acknowledge the established protocol but permit me to recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, Brigadier Mark Phillips. I think the Senior Minister has left, our Executive Director, Mrs. Riley, and Permanent Secretary, Dr. Alfred King. As we bring the curtain down on this event, it is my distinct honor and privilege, on behalf of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Agency, CDM, to extend our heartfelt appreciation to all who've contributed to the successful launch of this partnership breakfast of the 14th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, or as we call it, CDM 14. First and foremost, I wish to extend our deepest gratitude to the government and people of the Republic of Guyana for graciously hosting this year's CDM conference. Guyana continues to demonstrate its unwavering commitment to regional solidarity and resilience. The warmth of your hospitality, the efficiency of your support, and your steadfast partnership have provided the ideal environment for us to launch what promises to be a significant chapter in the Caribbean's resilience journey. To our Executive Director of CDM, I want to thank you for your welcome and for setting the tone for how we plan for CDM 14 in December here in Georgetown, Guyana. To the Honorable Prime Minister, Brigadier Mark Phillips, sir, we offer our sincere appreciation for your endorsement of CDM 14 and for delivering such a compelling keynote address under the theme Resilience as Statecraft Governing at the Speed of Risk. Prime Minister, your remarks challenge us to think differently about resilience as a fundamental principle of governance and leadership. You reminded us that in a rapidly changing world, marked by climate uncertainty, economic shocks, public health emergencies, and emerging threats, the ability to anticipate, adapt, and to act decisively must become embedded in the way that countries govern and lead. We also want to thank you for your vision and for outlining the plans for the disaster management sector in Guyana, and certainly for your continued support to the comprehensive disaster management agenda. So thank you. To Ms. Grosvenor, or I like to call her AG, I want to thank you for opening our minds to CDM 14. We thank you for taking us through you called it the reveal, and certainly the tour of the scheduled CDM 14 conference planned for December 7th to 12th here in Georgetown. I also want to thank the Executive Finance Dialogue team, and permit me to say that whenever people in finance speak, it sometimes leaves me in awe, and this morning was no different, even though sometimes I'm left trying to understand what they meant. But somehow this morning, that still caught my attention, and I'm sure it caught yours. So we want to thank the experts who've taken us through that critical conversation, given the financial challenges that the sector faces in the region. Thank you for opening our minds to understanding where we are and where we need to get to as a region when it comes to resilience. To our sponsors and development partners, we wish to express our profound gratitude. Your generous financial and technical support enables us to convene, collaborate, and innovate and advance the resilience agenda through the Caribbean. Without your commitment and investment, initiatives of this scale would not be possible. And we thank you for believing in the vision of CDM 14 and the importance of building safer, stronger, and more resilient societies. Special recognition is extended to the Director General, Colonel Nazrul Hussain, and his staff at the Civil Defense Commission. From planning and coordination, I don't know if that was my indication to stop, but I'll start again. From planning and coordination to logistics and execution, the CDC has worked tirelessly along CDM to ensure the success of this launch and the wider conference preparations. Colonel, your professionalism and dedication exemplifies the spirit of collaboration that defines regional disaster management. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude today's launch, let us not be viewed as a simple opening of another conference, but let it be a call to action. The risk confronting our Caribbean region continues to evolve in scale, frequency, and complexity. Climate change, extreme weather events, environmental degradation, economic vulnerabilities, and emerging hazards demand that we move beyond business as usual. The theme of CDM 14 reminds us that resilience must become a defining feature of leadership, policy, investment, and action. Together, we have the opportunity and indeed the responsibility to build a Caribbean that is more resilient, more inclusive, and better prepared for the challenges of tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for your presence, your partnership, and your unwavering commitment to this shared endeavor. I look forward to seeing you in Georgetown, Guyana, and may God bless you and continue to bless the Caribbean region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Keith. And now if you're saying, ladies and gentlemen, well, if this was the launch, could you imagine what the conference is going to be like? Well, we've certainly set the bar. Thank you very much to Sedima and Andrea. I'll leave you with our closing comments as we wrap up our launch of CDM 14.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It was certainly a pleasure co-hosting with you. And I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone here, as well as those persons who are online, to join us in Guyana in December 7 to 12, 2026, where we're going to be looking at resilient sectors, sustainable communities, and safer states. At this checkpoint, as we accelerate without distraction, going into 2030 and beyond. So see you soon. Network, network, network before you leave. And remember, don't take this with you. Leave it here with your commitment. We look forward to partnering with you.
Have a great day, everyone.